your heart can stop beating from pure grief, and your arteries will be completely clear. A man had almost no brain left inside his skull and lived a full, normal life with a job, a wife, and 2 children. Cancer that had already spread through a patient's entire body disappeared without treatment in under 2 months. No drugs or surgery, no scientific explanation. These were documented, verified, sitting in peer-reviewed journals with a large blank space where the cause should be. The human body is not the machine science wants it to be. It is something far stranger, something that keeps producing results without producing reasons. And the people who have spent their entire careers studying it will quietly admit, if you ask them the right way, that some of what it does they simply cannot account for. These are 11 of those things. Each one is documented and confirmed. Researchers still debate, but none of them explained. And the mechanism is not fully understood. 1. In 2004, a 55-year-old woman in Japan was rushed into emergency care after receiving devastating news. Her doctors looked at the scans and found exactly what they expected to find in someone experiencing a massive cardiac event. The heart muscle was failing. Blood flow was compromised. Every indicator matched a heart attack. Then they went looking for the blocked artery that should have caused it. There was no blocked artery. Her arteries were completely clear. Her heart was shutting down not from physical damage, but from grief. This is called Takotsubo syndrome. The medical community also calls it broken heart syndrome, which sounds like something from a song lyric until you understand it is a real, documented, potentially fatal event in which sudden emotional trauma causes the left ventricle of the heart to balloon out, lose its normal shape, and stop pumping blood correctly. The organ physically deforms under the weight of feeling something too large to process. It can be triggered by bereavement, by betrayal, by extreme fear, by the kind of news that arrives and restructures everything around it. And here's the part that should make you stop. It has also been triggered by extreme joy, a surprise party that the nervous system did not expect, a reunion the heart was not prepared for. The syndrome does not distinguish between unbearable grief and overwhelming happiness. It just responds to the size of the emotion. Doctors have a name for it. They have imaging that shows the deformity. They have a treatment protocol. What they do not have is an explanation for the direct line that apparently runs from the worst thing you have ever been told to the muscle responsible for keeping you alive. That line exists. Medicine has confirmed it. What runs along that line, how thought becomes cardiac failure, is still sitting in the unanswered pile. Most people grow up understanding that hearts can be broken in the poetic sense. Very few realize they can be broken in the clinical, measurable, scan it and see sense. And medicine has known about the difference for decades and still cannot fully explain it. 2. You are awake right now in the dark, where you think you are. The room is exactly as it should be. The ceiling is the same. The light coming through the curtains is the same. Everything checks out, and then you realize you cannot move. Not a finger or a jaw. Not a single voluntary muscle in your body responds to the instruction your brain is sending. You are conscious, but you are completely paralyzed inside your own skin. Sleep paralysis happens to somewhere between 8 and 40% of people at least once in their lives. The rates climb sharply among people with anxiety, irregular sleep schedules, or high stress. The standard medical explanation is this. During REM sleep, the stage associated with vivid dreaming, the brain sends a signal that disconnects voluntary muscle control. It does this to stop you from physically acting out your dreams. Occasionally, that signal does not release when waking happens. Consciousness switches on. The body stays locked. The explanation is reasonable. It is accepted. It does not account for the second half of the experience. Between 40 and 75% of sleep paralysis episodes involve hallucinations. Vivid, sensory, terrifying experiences that feel entirely present. A figure standing in the corner of the room. A weight pressing down on the chest from something sitting on it. A presence that every instinct insists is real and immediate and directly in front of you. People describe them as the most real thing they have ever experienced. Here is what medicine cannot explain about that. The descriptions are consistent. Across different cultures, across different centuries. Something sitting on the chest. Something watching from a corner. The overwhelming sense that something is in the room that should not be. The brain is producing something during this state. What it is producing and why it produces the same image across unconnected civilizations separated by thousands of years is a question neuroscience has published papers about and has not answered. The paralysis can be explained. The figure standing in the corner of your room has not been. 3. In 2002, a study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine that made orthopedic surgeons uncomfortable for years afterward. Researchers took patients with severe, chronic knee pain and split them into 3 groups. One group received standard arthroscopic surgery to repair the joint. A second group received the same procedure, but a reduced version. The third group received what is called a sham surgery. Surgeons made small incisions in the knee, moved instruments around inside the joint, and then closed the cuts. No actual procedure was performed. The patients did not know which group they were in. 2 years later, the researchers measured pain levels across all 3 groups. The sham surgery patients reported the same improvement as the patients who received real procedures. Their knees hurt less. The improvement was real, measurable, and sustained. The surgery was not. This is the placebo effect. And if you think you already understand it, you probably have the simpler version. The version most people know says you believe you will feel better, so your brain produces that feeling. Psychology overriding physiology. A useful trick. That version keeps medicine and mystery in separate rooms, which is where medicine prefers them. But then researchers started removing the deception entirely. They told patients directly that what they were taking contained no active ingredient, no illusion or false belief. Open-label placebo studies. Fake medicine given to people who fully knew it was fake. And the patients still improved, measurably, across multiple studies in multiple countries. And then scientists started examining what was happening inside the body during placebo responses. Actual measurable changes in brain chemistry. Real release of endorphins and dopamine. Blood pressure dropping. Inflammation markers in the blood genuinely shifting. Your body was not pretending to respond. It was responding to nothing. The conversation between what you believe and what your body does at the chemical level is one that science has been staring at for a very long time without finding the other end of it. 4. Ashlyn Blocker was born in 2004 in Patterson, Georgia. She scraped her knee as a toddler and watched the blood appear with the calm curiosity of a child who had simply noticed something interesting. She put her hand on a hot stove and pulled it back because she saw the danger, not because she felt it. She bit through her tongue before she was old enough to understand that this was the kind of thing that should have made her cry. She never cried from pain. Not once, because she has never felt pain in her life. Congenital insensitivity to pain is a rare genetic condition in which the nervous system fails to transmit the signals that most people experience as pain. The nerve endings exist. The injury registers at a cellular level. The signal simply never completes its journey to the brain in any form the person can recognize. To Ashlyn, damage and sensation have no relationship. Her parents spent her childhood watching her the way you watch a child near traffic. Not to prevent her from being hurt, but to notice when she had already been hurt and had not realized it. Broken bones discovered by accident. Joint damage visible in scans taken for other reasons. Wounds found, not felt. Here is what pain actually is that nobody explains until it disappears. Pain is not a punishment or malfunction. It is the body's only real-time communication channel for damage. It is the alarm system, the emergency broadcast, the signal that tells every other system to stop doing what it is doing and address the problem before the problem becomes irreparable. Without that alarm, the body accumulates destruction quietly, without protest and without warning, until the damage is already done. People with this condition do not live longer, more comfortable lives. They tend to die younger, not from the absence of pain itself, but from everything pain was supposed to prevent and never got to. Science understands the genetic mechanism. It can identify exactly which mutation causes it. What it has never solved is the question that sits just behind that knowledge. If we understand completely why pain disappears, why can we not reliably turn it off for the millions of people living in chronic pain that nothing has fixed? The mechanism that silences pain in one group of people is studied, documented, and mapped. And it still has not helped the other group. Science is sitting between two problems it cannot solve, and they are connected by the same nerve pathway. Before the next one, if that challenges what you think pain is, the next case challenges what a brain is, hit subscribe right now. Because we do this every week, and you do not want to find it 6 months late. And drop a comment. Tell us your age and where you are watching from. Now, the next entry is where this gets considerably stranger. 5. In 2013, researchers published a study that should have made international headlines. It landed in a scientific journal, and most people who were not already in the field never heard about it. What the researchers found was this. The roughly 100 trillion bacteria living inside your gut, your microbiome, the collection of microorganisms that outnumber your own cells by a ratio of 3 to 1, are producing chemicals that directly alter your mood, your anxiety levels, your stress response, and in ways that several studies have now suggested, possibly your personality. Not influencing those things from a distance, directly altering them. The chemicals involved are called neurotransmitters. Serotonin, dopamine, GABA, the same compound your brain uses to regulate how you feel and how you respond to the world. Roughly 90% of the serotonin in your body is not produced in your brain. It is produced in your gut. The microorganisms living in your intestine are manufacturing the chemical most directly associated with your emotional stability and sending it upward through a dedicated nerve pathway called the vagus nerve directly into your central nervous system. That means the mood you woke up in this morning was shaped in part by an ecosystem living in your stomach that you have never thought about and never chose. The anxiety that settles in your chest in the afternoon has biological contributors that are not you and were never you. The personality you have built your entire identity around is being co-authored by organisms that have their own agenda, and it is not yours. Here is where the studies became difficult for people to sit with. Researchers transplanted gut bacteria from anxious mice into calm ones. The calm mice became anxious. Then they reversed the procedure. The anxious mice became calm. They changed personality by changing what lived in the gut. Human research is still catching up, but the nerve is the same. The chemicals are the same. The direction of travel is the same. You think of yourself as one thing, one mind, one self, one continuous and coherent person who makes choices and feels things and builds a life. But that self is partly the output of trillions of organisms that are not you, have never been you, and are currently running their own chemistry inside your intestine. That is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. That is what the published science actually says. 6. Your liver can regenerate itself from 25% of its original size. Not slowly or partially, not in some reduced capacity, but fully in weeks. This is why surgeons can remove 3/4 of a living person's liver, transplant what they have removed into a patient whose liver has failed completely, and then watch both pieces grow back to full working size within months. The donor ends up with a complete liver. The recipient ends up with a complete liver. One organ that was divided in half is now 2 complete organs. Nothing else in the adult human body does this. Not the kidney, not the heart, not the brain. The liver performs this regeneration routinely, reliably, and completely without being asked. What the mechanism cannot tell you is how it knows when to stop. The mechanism of liver regeneration is one of the most studied questions in all of cellular biology. Scientists know which genes switch on during the process. They know roughly which molecular signals initiate the growth. What they cannot account for is the part that happens at the end. Somehow the organ measures its own mass as it grows. It monitors its own size, continues expanding until it reaches precisely the correct volume for the body it lives in, and then stops. Not approximately or within a range. That is the part that sits uncomfortably in the textbooks. Growth that does not know when to stop is cancer. Growth that monitors itself, continues to a precise target, recognizes when that target has been reached, and then shuts off completely is something the field does not have a complete molecular explanation for. Every cell involved in the process is following a set of instructions. What those instructions say at the very end, the part that reads stop here, has not been fully decoded. The most regenerative organ in your body is doing something science finds difficult to fully explain. Every time a liver grows back. Every single time. 7. There is a case in the neuroscience literature that researchers still reference in lectures, not because it provides an answer, but because it refuses to allow the question to stay comfortable. A 44-year-old man in France came into a clinic in 2007 because of mild weakness in his left leg. Doctors ordered brain imaging. When the results came back, they found that the space inside his skull was mostly fluid. The structures responsible for consciousness, memory, language, and personality, the structures without which neuroscience says a person cannot function, have been compressed by slowly expanding fluid over the course of decades into a thin outer shell pressed against the inside of the cranium. By volume, he was missing roughly 90% of a normal human brain. He was a married civil servant with 2 children. His IQ measured at 75, below average. He had held a job for years. He maintained relationships. He lived a life that by every observable measure was normal. The case was published in The Lancet and promptly forced researchers to confront a question they did not have the framework to answer. If consciousness, memory, and personality require the specific brain structures that every neuroscience textbook says they require, how was this man using structures he did not have? How was a shell of tissue performing the functions that should have needed the full architecture? This is what neuroplasticity looks like at its most extreme. The brain's ability to reorganize itself around damage, to redistribute function across whatever tissue remains, to route around the missing pieces the way traffic routes around a closed road. Doctors know it happens. They design stroke rehabilitation around it. They rely on it in traumatic brain injury recovery. What they do not know is whether it has a ceiling, whether there's a point at which the brain cannot compensate further. Because the man from France had tested a ceiling that should not have existed and had walked through it without noticing. A man with almost no brain was leading a normal life. That is not an anecdote or a rumor or a misremembered statistic. It is a documented medical case in one of the most respected journals in science. And it is sitting there quietly, waiting for an explanation that has not arrived. 8. When a limb, is amputated, roughly 80% of patients continue to feel it, not as a memory or a metaphor, but as a physical, present, often painful reality. They feel the fingers of the hand that was removed closing into a fist. They feel the toes of the foot that no longer exist pressing against the floor. There is no contact to make. They feel pain in tissue that is gone. The sensations can be so vivid and so constant that they become one of the most difficult aspects of recovery, more disruptive in some cases than the loss of the limb itself. The brain maps the body. Every region of skin and muscle has a corresponding neighborhood in the cortex, a cluster of neurons dedicated to processing information from that area. When the limb is removed, those neurons stop receiving their usual input. They do not go quiet in response. They continue firing. They recruit signals from neighboring brain regions. They produce sensations the nervous system insists are real because the part of the brain responsible for those sensations has not been told anything it recognizes as a reason to stop. Now here is the part that genuinely changes the shape of this story. A neurologist named Vilayana Ramachandran in the 1990s tried something that should not have worked. He placed a mirror vertically along the midline of the body so that the reflection of the remaining limb appeared in the space where the missing one had been. He then asked patients to move their surviving limb while watching its mirror image, as though the reflection were the missing limb responding. In a significant number of cases, the phantom pain stopped, not reduced, stopped. A visual image of movement in a mirror resolved pain emanating from a limb that no longer existed. The brain saw the movement, accepted it as evidence that the missing limb had responded, and released the pain it had been generating in that limb's absence. Your nervous system looked at a mirror, decided it was reality, and reorganized a pain signal around it. That is either the most elegant demonstration of how constructed your physical experience is or the most unsettling one. Possibly both. And science is still working out what exactly to do with it. 9. Until 2013, science did not know your brain cleaned itself. For the entire prior history of neuroscience, the mechanism did not appear in the literature because no one had found it. It was discovered essentially by accident during sleep research at the University of Rochester, and what the discovery revealed changed how researchers think about some of the most feared neurological diseases in existence. During deep sleep, and specifically during deep sleep rather than any other kind, the brain's glymphatic system activates. The space between individual brain cells expands by approximately 60%. Cerebrospinal fluid rushes through those channels and flushes out the metabolic waste products that accumulate throughout the day while the brain is working. Among those waste products are two specific proteins, beta-amyloid plaques and tau protein tangles, the two substances most closely associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease. Your brain, during deep sleep, is washing out the compounds that appear to cause one of the most feared and least understood forms of neurodegeneration in all of science. And it does this exclusively during deep sleep, the specific, sustained deep sleep that most people in the modern world are not reliably getting. Every night that the cleaning cycle runs incomplete, the debris is left behind. Every night of poor sleep is a night the waste products stay. And the accumulation across months and years appears to be exactly what the early stages of Alzheimer's look like under a microscope. Here is what keeps sleep researchers awake at night, which is a sentence that should not be as ironic as it is. This discovery was made a little over a decade ago. The full implications are still being worked out. What is already clear is this. The most important thing your brain does every single day may not happen during any of the hours you're conscious, thinking, feeling, creating, or working. It may happen in the hours you spend completely unaware, unconscious and still. The maintenance your brain most needs may be happening in the only window of time you spend not directing any of it. That is a deeply strange sentence for neuroscience to have arrived at. And it is where the current research sits. If this video is changing the way you think about the body you have been living in your whole life, subscribe right now and tell us in the comments what age you are and where in the world you're watching from. Because what is coming in the final two entries is the part that changes the conversation. Stay with this. 10. In 1992, a woman in Ohio was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The cancer had moved beyond the lymphatic system into surrounding tissue. Her prognosis was not hopeful. She began a course of chemotherapy, developed a serious infection, and her treatment was discontinued before it was complete. Her oncologist prepared the conversation that oncologists have to prepare in situations like that. 6 months later, she came back for a follow-up scan. The cancer was gone. Not reduced, but gone. There was no trace of malignancy in any imaging. No residual markers in the blood. The team ran the tests again. Same result. The cancer that had spread through her body had disappeared without completing treatment, without any additional intervention, and without any explanation the medical record could support. Spontaneous cancer remission is real. It is documented in the peer-reviewed literature across multiple cancer types: melanoma, renal cell carcinoma, certain lymphomas, and leukemias. Tumors that have been growing for years simply stop. Then they shrink. Then they disappear entirely, leaving nothing behind that imaging can detect. The cases are rare. They are not theoretical. They are in the files. The leading candidate for a mechanism is the immune system. Some trigger, some shift in the body's internal environment, some combination of fever and immune activation and cellular signaling that nobody has been able to identify reliably enough to reproduce, causes the immune system to recognize and destroy what it had been failing to address. That is the theory. The evidence is consistent with it. The mechanism has not been nailed down in a way that allows science to do it intentionally. And that is the brutal thing sitting at the center of this case, and every case like it. The human body can cure its own cancer. It has done it, on record, multiple times, across multiple cancer types, in patients whose charts said it was not going to happen. And the mechanism cannot yet tell you how to make it happen on purpose. The body has a capability that exceeds the current ability of science to access it. The proof is sitting in the files. The instructions are not. 11. Humans are the only species on Earth known to cry in response to emotion. Every other animal that produces tears does so for a physiological reason: lubrication of the eye, irritation from a foreign substance, reflex response to light or wind. Only humans produce tears from grief or from joy or from watching something beautiful or from feeling something so large it has to find a way out of the body. And those emotional tears are chemically distinct from reflex tears, not just in quantity, in composition. They contain stress hormones, specifically cortisol and ACTH, compounds associated with the body's acute stress response, which means that when you cry, your body is not simply expressing emotion. It is excreting it, literally removing stress hormones from the system through the eyes. Nobody fully understands why. The evolutionary purpose of emotional crying is one of the genuinely debated questions in the literature. The psychological relief that follows a sustained cry is real and measurable. The mechanism connecting the emotion to the neurochemistry to the tear duct, the actual pathway from feeling something too large to hold to the body, finding a chemical exit for it, is still not fully mapped. You have been doing this your entire life. Science has been watching humans do it for centuries. And the simplest, most distinctly human thing the body does, the one thing that marks you as something different from every other creature alive, has not been fully explained. Here is what those 11 entries have in common. They are not mysteries from lack of observation. They are not unexplained because nobody has studied them. They are documented, measured, reproducible, and sitting in the most respected journals in science. Every single one of them has a name. Several have extensive research programs dedicated to them. Science is not failing because the scientists are not good enough. It is encountering something that produces results without producing reasons. Something that works without fully revealing how. Your body cures its own cancer. It reconstructs lost limbs in the nervous system. It breaks the heart clinically and rebuilds the brain around enormous damage. It generates mood from bacteria and washes its own cortex clean in the dark. It paralyzed itself and produces figures that appear in the same corner of the room across thousands of years of unconnected human history. It grows organs back and knows exactly when to stop. It cries the chemicals of stress out through the eyes and has been doing it since before anyone thought to ask why. The honest conclusion, the one science is currently sitting with, is this. We know all of this happens. We cannot fully explain any of it. You've been living inside something that exceeds the framework built to understand it. And you have been doing it your entire life. You were just never told that the framework had limits. Which one of these made you stop? The one that rewrote something you thought was already settled? Drop it in the comments below. And if this changes how you see the body you have been walking around in your whole life, subscribe. Because we do this every week. And you do not want to miss what we find next. The most dangerous thing you will ever underestimate is something you have been carrying with you the whole time.